Let's talk about the Portuguese top flight situation at the moment, where we've got three teams that we often talk about and most listeners will be familiar with from Portugal. The legendary Benfica, the equally legendary, I would argue, Porto, and indeed Sporting Lisboa, all aiming for the top spot, and it seems like two of the three haven't quite achieved what they should be achieving at the moment. So there's drama in that. I wonder to what extent, Andy, Portuguese top flight football has got over the Ruben Amorim effect, given that he is he was, until he went to Manchester United, the new special one of Portuguese football.
Yeah, he was. And I think why he was so special is nothing to do with Jose Mourinho. It's just because he was such a good coach, and he'd spent 4 years, which is longer really than a good coach normally has at a Portuguese club, because they'll move on before then. He'd finessed Sporting into such a finished product that they were going to run away with the league by a mile. So him leaving for Manchester United was a blow for Portuguese football in one sense, but in the other sense, Benfica and Porto are thinking, hang on, title race here. We sniff a bit of weakness. And when they try and keep it going by replacing him, Sporting, with the B team manager, João Pereira, doesn't work out. Of course, he gets sacked on Christmas Day. He knew that he was going before Christmas Day, but still officially it's going to say he was sacked on Christmas Day, which is pretty bad. And then they bring in Rui Borges from Guimarães, who's done a pretty good job so far. But what's worked best for Sporting is the fact that they've managed to get themselves back in a really strong position. They're 6 points clear again now, because Benfica and Porto are stumbling over themselves to give it back to Sporting. So it's really interesting. Obviously, there's a particular context of pressure in a nation where only one of the big three always wins the league. So there are 2 times in history where one of those three has not won the Liga. So that's, I can tell you straight off what they are. Belenenses in 1946, Boavista in 2001. Because it's such a rare occurrence. I think most people who follow Portuguese football, it's like tattooed on their brains. So I think it has an effect on the atmosphere, because every point dropped for one of those big teams is treated like a massive disaster, a massive crisis. If you're a journalist and you're waiting in the mix zone outside the changing room to speak to the players afterwards, you know after they've dropped points, they're not going to speak to you. None of the players are going to stop. It makes your job quite difficult. But, I think it really underlines what a heavy atmosphere there is around every single point being dropped. And the fact that when Amorim went, there was an opportunity, and that neither Benfica or Porto have managed to take it thus far, has heaped so much pressure on both of those big clubs.
Yeah, Lars, I'm looking at the stats here. Benfica have 3 Liga losses in 4 games.
Yeah.
Now, Sporting are 6 points clear of both Benfica and Porto. I mean, you could ask, how did they throw it away as such? Why are they stumbling over themselves, as Andy put it, to offer Sporting the title? Or is there something deeper going on in Portuguese football?
Well, with the stats, you could take it one step further and look at, last season, Sporting won the league. They had 2 defeats, 3 draws, and they won the rest of their games. Sporting now have 2 defeats and 2 draws, and we're in January. So it's going to be a very different points tally unless they just win the rest, which seems unlikely. And similarly, Benfica finished second last season with just 4 defeats all season. Again, they've lost 4 games so far this season, and we're in January. So it's clear that there's a bit of turbulence there. And as Andy said, we're used to these teams just winning all the time. It just seems to be that it seems to me, and again, Andy will know the details better, but from a distance, all those 3 clubs have had issues on the manager side of things this season. And that will inevitably create some instability. Of course, Amorim leaving mid-season I was surprised he didn't go anywhere in the summer, but I guess he was waiting for the right opportunity and considered Man United to be that opportunity. But of course, following someone like him is not going to be easy, and some turbulence there is to be expected. Benfica getting rid of Roger Schmidt and turning to Bruno Lage. That's going to be that's a change that causes some instability, and of course there's been managerial goings on at Porto as well, Andy.
Yeah, that's right, and it's a really strange one at Porto because they appointed the assistant to Sergio Conceição, Vitor Bruno, which Conceição, being the measured and calm man that he is, made it clear that he thought Vitor Bruno was a massive traitor for not coming with him. The actual word he used, traitor. Andre Villas-Boas pinned his colours to the Vitor Bruno mast and said, "This is my guy." And when it started to go wrong, I mean, the night before he was sacked, when they lost 3-1 at Gil Vicente, and the bus was coming back to the Dragão to be met by some very angry fans. I mean, it was in a meeting later that night in front of the whole team that Vitor Bruno was sacked. I should clarify. The fans were chanting AVB amateur, sack the coach. I mean, that can't be any more clear, can it?
He's the chair, by the way.
He's the president, and taking on from Jorge Nuno Pinto da Costa, who's of course in charge of the club for 42 years, and so has a lot of people still quite loyal to him in the fan base. And AVB has come in and said, right, I'm going to affect a change of culture here. Now, this is the first major decision he had to make. Now, he thought, okay, I've got someone forward thinking. The new coach, Martin Anselmi, who's come from Cruz Azul in Mexico, but is Argentinian, and he was sort of pitched as the Argentinian Amorim. He's young, he's got loads of energy. I mean, he has no playing career, which makes him quite different to Ruben Amorim. But so they think they get him in, and it turns into this massive saga because Anselmi has got a release clause in his Cruz Azul contract, which is for 2.8 million euros. And so Porto go, right, we're going to play that. And the president of Cruz Azul says, no, it's only 2.8 million for elite clubs, and you are not an elite club. So he flies off from Mexico to Portugal, waiting to take over. And he's like, no, we're going to call in FIFA because you're not an elite club. And so Porto have to end up paying more than twice that clause. At least that is the story that Cruz Azul are giving, to allow Anselmi to actually take over.
Oh, my goodness. Lars?
I'm very curious about what the definition of an elite club is. It seems like a diss from Cruz Azul. And also, do you just go, you put that in the contract, oh, it's an elite club, and then whoever comes in, no, you're not elite, mate. No,
Exactly.
you're not. And it's just, I love that. I also note with interest that club president Andre Villas-Boas, first they had like a really strong domineering character in Sergio Conceição, and when he left, Villas-Boas put in charge the guy who used to be assistant to the very domineering Portuguese personality. And then for his second move, he went for a young guy with not much of a playing career.
Just like him.
Is there a bit of self-interest going on? Is this Villas-Boas
knows?
going like
Who
this?
knows?
Same thing.
These are good guys. This is why assistants to very bossy Portuguese men and guys who've not played the game at a high level. This is what we want here. Maybe also people who are interested in rally cars will be the next thing.
Quite apart from Andreas Villas-Boas' personal interest, isn't it the case, though, with Vitor Bruno that he fell out with the players, not least Pepe, one of the players?
Yeah, that's right. The Brazilian winger who he basically after this game against Gil Vicente that turned out to be his last, he coated him off on TV in the interview afterwards and said, "Oh yeah, it's just I only want players who want to be here." And of course, Pepe was straight on social media. By which point, Vitor Bruno had been sacked and didn't have any comeback, so he had the last word to say. Actually, yeah, he left me out for kicking the ball into the goal too hard when we were playing in the mini training goals, which obviously made him sound ridiculous, and he had no way of replying to it. But this chaos is not just particular to Porto, because I think Porto, if you take a widescreen view of it, Villas-Boas has got a lot to do to get the club on a firm financial footing, and he's taken over on a reformer ticket, and their squad's not that good. Whereas Benfica, Roger Schmidt was fired because, having had his contract renewed in his first season, because he was doing such a good job and they were playing such great football, they didn't have a great end to last season. They maybe could have separated then, but decided not to, because then the contract extension would have made them look a bit stupid. Ended up doing it a couple of months into this season, brought back Bruno Lage, and he had a great start, and of course he knows the club very well. But they've spent on players like Vangelos Pavlidis, who had quite a slow start goal scoring wise, although he ended up scoring that hat-trick against Barcelona in the Champions League. Kerem Aktürkoğlu, who started brilliantly and has levelled off a little bit. So I think the pressure on Benfica is very different. I think it's a strictly hardcore fan pressure at Porto, especially from supporters of the previous regime. Whereas Benfica, you can look at them and say they are just straight underachieving.
With Bruno Lage, there's been a couple of things. So first of all, him going full Phil Brown after the Barcelona game and telling the players off on the pitch. That was an interesting one. I mean, it's good. He's worked in England, He's learned some football heritage from the Premier League, and telling the players off. Yeah, always works out well. And secondly, there's been this business with the leaked audio that I've only seen brief bits of, but maybe Andy can enlighten us further. But apparently, a kind of a discussion he had with some irate fans ended up getting recorded and leaked, in which he said things like, I can't bench a 20 million player because then they'll leave for 5 million and we can't buy anyone else. Like, he said a few indiscreet things that have ended up in the media. So bad times for Bruno Lage, seems to me.
Yeah, I don't know why coaches and players do this, knowing everyone's got a camera phone with broadcastable quality sound and video nowadays. We'll get onto Teji Savanier at Montpellier another day, I think.